sometimes what you initially regard as nonsense can produce beneficial results. I'm still discussing the subject of what it means to be accused of being very English. And I know it's not as a compliment, which is what Mr. IC3 was saying. I did know that, but even if it was not meant as a compliment, you have to ask, why are you being accused of being very English? So the Israeli was seen to be saying that the English say one thing and do another. They take on the one rule for us and another for you, conquered peoples of the British Empire. I think it's that sort of thing that he means. And that's obviously unfair. In fact, if you're saying that you are subject to different rules for some reason or other, then you are separating yourself from the very group that you wish to be a member of, because you're saying one rule for us and another rule for you, even though we live in the same country and we are the same religion. Obviously, there will be a time when there will be privileges of a leader who obviously has a right to do things that those who are not leaders cannot and are not supposed to do. So that is what I think Yoav meant when he said, "You're very English." And then Mr. IC3 came along and said, it's not meant as a compliment, but as an insult, suggesting that I might not be what I'm supposed to be. But what am I supposed to be anyway? Well, what is anyone supposed to be? And I'm saying, even if we forget who we are and don't even know who our parents are, what are we left with but the language that we speak? So our best language is our identity. And we know that not everyone who speaks English agree with each other. And we also know that once upon a time, when Europe was white and Christian, they didn't agree with each other either. And that is why, in time, the Europeans, rejected Christianity as their political orthodoxy and adopted replacements such as liberalism, Nazism, fascism, communism, and socialism. And they've already tried all the wrong ways. And I'm saying they should now consider seriously my proposal of adopting Sharia for non-Muslims. And now we come to your question, Kyriaki. And I've just done that. I have summarized secular Quranism as Sharia for non-Muslims. I am not Muslim. Don't let the avatar fool you. It's really it's my avatar. I have to use an image that will be unique and identifiably myself. But I do keep reminding people that I'm not Muslim. So back to the issue of Sharia for non-Muslims. I am non-Muslim. I want to control the interpretation of secular Quranism, also known as Sharia for non-Muslims. You would have thought that Muslims would support me and say, well, at least it's a move in the right direction, even though it's not our kind of Sharia, right? You would have thought they'd say that. That was what I did until I realised that, to a man, they're cowards. They either pretend not to understand what I'm saying or say I have no right to interpret the Quran because I'm not Muslim and don't speak Arabic. But I'm saying these Muslims already live in the West, and they already have to live under the laws of globo homo and gay marriage and transgenderism. So why would they complain about Sharia for non-Muslims? They have no reason to do that. I imagine they wish to distance themselves from my idea because it's new, it's radical, and they don't want anyone to even think that they might mix in circles that would make them aware of secular Quranism, which is, of course, a radical idea proposing to draw a line under the failures of Christo-liberalism. So Christo-liberalism is, well, a zombie religion. Nobody believes in it. Most Westerners are atheists. The ones who claim to be Christian don't really believe in God, because if they did, they would be dismayed and mortified at the idea that they're going to hell because they have broken the commandment of no idolatry and no blasphemy, because according to the Christian narrative, Jesus was executed for blasphemy, and according to the history of the West, Europeans have been worshipping an executed blasphemer as a co-equal of the supreme and eternal Abrahamic God who created the universe. So it makes no sense at all. They might try and excuse themselves and say, well, we had to go along to get along because the alternative for our ancestors, if they did decide to question the Trinity or even deny it, would be the penalty of being burned as a heretic. So you would expect our ancestors to keep stum about not quite agreeing with the religion of the king, which is Christianity, and it is totemic of Christianity to be Trinitarian, because any other form of Christianity would be heresy. So you can't be a Unitarian Christian because, well, you could, but you would be persecuted as a heretic and you would be treated as low status and, or just not be treated very well. And you know how Europeans would persecute each other for being the wrong kind of Christian. During the European Wars of Religion, also known as the Wars of the Reformation, and in America, they did have Christians being mean to each other and killing each other for being the wrong kind of Christian. So in time, these white people stopped believing in Christianity or stopped taking it literally. And so they're left with something called moralistic therapeutic deism, which is this vague idea that anybody good goes to heaven, and in the meantime, we must be law-abiding citizens of the West, without discussing whether laws could be immoral and, in fact, go against the commandments of the Abrahamic God. Christianity is by definition infringing on the first and second commandments, and some of you may have heard of Adam Schiff, this priest killer who thought that priests and pastors would be breaking the first and second commandments, and he killed one of them and is now in prison. I haven't really been keeping up with whether he's been tried, but during his interview, which you can see on YouTube, you will see that he makes perfect sense. He was interviewed by this female reporter, and he said that he didn't think God would punish him because he was only carrying out what he thought God would want him to do, because those who break the first and second commandments have to be punished. Now, Adam Schiff comes from a white middle-class family, so he is articulate and educated. So he's not crazy who doesn't make sense, and so we can all understand what he means. We might not agree with what he did, but that was the reason why he killed that priest. And if Western media were doing its job properly, there would be a discussion in the West about whether Christianity is idolatry and blasphemy. But since global media run by the CIA is all about suppressing the truth and making us believe in silly things, none of that happened. So you can even commit some spectacular act of, I guess it would be terrorism, what Adam Schiff was doing, and then just be forgotten about, because the fourth estate, i.e. the media, are not doing their job properly and have been told by the CIA to suppress truth and promote nonsense and lies. But what I think is very easy to explain is that the corruption of our ruling classes can easily be addressed by having a set of rules that we as a group are supposed to follow. Why don't we talk about doing that? But nobody seems interested in solving problems, only complaining about them. And this suggests that the men have turned to women and are adopting a risk-averse strategy of only complaining, but never considering a solution, because that might get them into trouble with the authorities who don't like their proposals. So they keep stum and only go on about whether Jews are to blame and whether Muslims are scarier than Jews. And so the problem is never solved, because we are being distracted by the egos of the people promoting their YouTube channels. And they are not honorable or honest. And they're certainly not political activists, because if they were political activists, they wouldn't give a damn about their YouTube channel. They would be indifferent to what happens to their YouTube channel and just be saying what they believe to be the truth, instead of believing in the lies and the Islamophobic tropes that are currently being promoted. And it's not even new Islamophobic tropes, they're just rehashed, warmed up crap from the past, like Muslim grooming gangs. There's really nothing new. They have scraped the old barrel out, and there doesn't seem to be any new Islamophobic tropes. In the meantime, Daniel Haqiqatjou is winning all the arguments against hypocrites pretending to be Christian and repeating the same old Islamophobic tropes like Muhammad is a paedophile, Muslim grooming gangs ad nauseum. And I have been trying to impress upon Muslims that the only way to get their attention is to say Christians are cursed by God because of their idolatry and blasphemy. But it doesn't mean that Jews and Muslims get off the hook. If Jews and Muslims really believed in God and wanted to obey his laws and believed in the afterlife, they would be supporting me and agreeing with me that Christianity is indeed idolatry and blasphemy, and God, if he does indeed exist, would curse Christians for their idolatry and blasphemy that has been outstanding for 2,000 years now. They would agree with me and support me, but instead they come up with all kinds of irrational and irrelevant responses like, oh, but we've already done it. Oh, but they already know. And rubbish like that. This means that these people claiming to be Jews and Muslims are, in fact, hypocrites. And the reason why I like the Quran so much is that it says hypocrites go to hell. In the Hadith, there is a concept of hidden idolatry, and it is my thesis that hidden idolatry manifests itself as hypocrisy. Who is a hypocrite? A hypocrite is a person who pretends to believe in the current political orthodoxy in order to claim membership of an important group. As we all know, religious groups are the most powerful groups in the world because they outlive empires and transcend nations. So if you're going to try to get yourself to the top, you would claim to be a member of a religious group, because doing so makes people think that you must in some way be more principled than atheists or agnostics. So that's a reason why everybody pretends to, well, that's why people who claim to be Jews and Christians and Muslims pretend to do so. If it's not for a conscious status-seeking reason, it would be because they have to hold on to the religion of mum and dad would be angry with them if they converted out of the religion of mum and dad. There would be social problems and status problems if you were rejected by your family and your community for converting out of the religion of your community and your parents and your family. So that would be the operating reasons of why people stick to the religion of mum and dad. But I put it to you that if you had a country to run and weren't concerned about what mum and dad thought of you for not following their religion, then you would choose the best religion available to rule this country that you have been given to govern. And I'm saying, of course, you would choose Sharia. And if you're not a believer in Muslim, Sharia for non-Muslims is the next best thing. There was a verse I was going to quote because it came up in the exchange I had on Jacob Forterecci's channel. So Yoav and was it someone else? Yoav was saying that because what I'm doing is so audacious, which is basically telling Jews, Christians and Muslims that they've got their religion. Okay, I'm telling the Christians have got the wrong religion altogether. I'm saying to Jews that if they really believed in God, they would convert to Islam, because Islam gives them a better afterlife than Judaism, because for one thing, the Torah doesn't even mention the afterlife. And we also know from history, from Jewish history, that the Sadducees didn't believe in God and said, there's nothing in the Torah that says we have to believe in God. But anyway, the Sadducees are extinct, and this is something we should bear in mind. After the extinction of the Sadducees, the Pharisees, I guess, won the argument, but they were kicked out of Israel. And rabbis are really the descendants of the Pharisees, and the Pharisees were the people who wanted to go by the rules. I guess the Sadducees were people who said, we don't care about the rules, and you can't do anything about it because you're peasants and we're the priesthood, so you'll just have to put up with it. And I guess things got so fractious amongst the Jews that eventually they asked the Romans to settle their disputes, and the Romans just came in and took over, and the rest is history. There were a number of Jewish-Roman wars, which, as we know, the Romans won. And then the Romans appropriated Jewish scripture and put the New Testament on top of it, giving it their Christian Roman twist to the Old Testament. So while Jews believe that the God of Israel is the one to worship, Christians say that Jesus is the co-equal of God. And because it's such a hard thing to believe, and people just wanted to question it as soon as they hear it, because it's so absurd. So that's why that's why the Edict of Thessalonica had to be passed in the year 380, forbidding anyone from being any other kind of Christian other than a Trinitarian kind of Christian, even though before that, between the death of Constantine and the reign of Theodosius, who was the one who passed the Edict of Thessalonica, Roman emperors were Arians and apostates, and actually I'm not sure, but anyway, the Roman religion was not settled until the year 380, when it was declared that all in the Roman Empire had to be Christian and had to be the Trinitarian kind of Christian, or there would be trouble. And after the Roman Empire declined and fell, this Trinitarian doctrine was carried out to the rest of Europe. Just to remind you that Christianity failed to prevent the decline and fall of Rome, and then Edward Gibbon said Rome declined and fell because of Christianity, which corrupted the morals of Romans. And Celsus, the Roman philosopher, had pretty derogatory things to say about Christianity. And really, the worst thing about it is being forced to believe in a clear absurdity, not being allowed to question it, and creating the trauma now that the white man has about his religion. Obviously, it's going to be very hard for me to tell these Westerners, traumatized by their matriarchy and the stupid wars they fought with each other about religion, the wars of the Reformation, the European wars of religion. And I'm saying, well, if you'd been Muslim all along, you could have saved yourself a lot of blood and treasure, but you weren't. So you suffered greatly with fighting all these wars that the 21st century Westerner neither knows nor cares about. And some of them seem to think, absurdly, that Christian nationalism is the way forward. And I'm telling them, just forget it. Just forget it, because there's no way Christians are going to agree with each other about anything. And even if they tried, even if they, held a council, those Westerners who hate the idea of America becoming a Christian republic would just round them up and destroy them, because that's what they do. That is what they would do to prevent the passing of a Christian amendment, making Christianity the official religion of America. I know Doug Wilson is saying, no, I'm really a libertarian, I have no designs on the First Amendment. And then he contradicts himself by saying, I have no plans right now to marginalize atheists and Muslims. Of course, the key word is right now. He's only waiting to get into power before he starts marginalizing atheists and Muslims. So what I propose is a Jewish-Muslim-Atheist-Agnostic Alliance. The alliance of 4 groups of people against the Christian nationalists. Surely we will win if we can all get together and agree to support and protect the First Amendment against these Christian nationalists who would, if they had it all their way, they would abolish the First Amendment. And don't think it hasn't been done ever, because it's been proposed since the American Civil War, and in Samoa, a Christian amendment has actually been passed. So we've got 6 people and no comments, but I will continue about being accused of being very English. I think it is a dig at the British imperialists who, did this one rule for us, and then, for us colonial administrators, and another for you, conquered peoples of the British Empire. And this would apply to the dominions of the British Empire too, and the dominions would be the white parts of the British Empire, i.e. Australia, Canada, New Zealand. And if you're going to categorize white people, of course the Americans are, top dog, followed by the Europeans, and right at the bottom would be the colonials, the white people living in the British dominions. They have the fewest rights of all. And in that discussion on Jacob Fattorecci's channel, a Canadian woman was talking about being English, even though I think she was saying she was, British and Canadian, and I didn't really get all that she was trying to say. But she was talking about the law, and I think Yoav and Sandy were agreeing that the law is the most, well, the law is always supreme, right? Yoav was saying, I forget which one of them said it, but anyway, the point was made that instead of worshipping God, the English worshipped their Supreme Court. As one would if you don't worship anything. If you don't worship any divine being, what you would be afraid of is the law, which could be used against you. So obviously the law should be moral, it should be fair, and this is what I'm saying Sharia for non-Muslims would be. But nobody is able to even try to understand what I'm saying because they're so afraid of being seen to be taking what I'm saying seriously. So even if I am engaging with people, they will quickly want to change the subject. They won't ask intelligent questions. They will repeat the same old Islamophobic tropes and pretend I only want to have their kind of Sharia, which would mean the stoning of adulterers and the cutting of clitorises and the usual crap that they have to repeat to themselves to keep their levels of fear and hatred of Muslims and Islam burning brightly. So there are many very intellectually dishonourable and dishonest people who lie to themselves in order to avoid having to acknowledge that Christo-liberalism is a zombie religion that nobody believes in, and they can't quite bring themselves right now to acknowledge that this situation is unsustainable. And I suppose they're just hoping that I will fade away and never be heard of again. Hello, Yon God? I don't know who this Master Yoda person is. I suppose I could look it up. I know this is a reference to Jacob Varturecci, who sometimes wears a hoodie. Oh, it's some movie character from Star Wars. He is a small, green, elderly, humanoid alien who is powerful with the Force and typically speaks in an inverted phrase order. Okay, I knew it was something stupid like that. Bird's Nest Rat Fair says, we are at present running on secular man-made pick-and-mix laws from religion. What made all the human society successful previously was allowing Muslims to rule 100%. We need to agree on a set of laws that we, at least in theory, think is better than all the laws of any mortal man. So that's why it has to be supposedly from a divine source. So that's a reason, right? Because we all know that every man is mortal, and when this king or ruler dies, things can be done a little differently unless the tradition of that leader is continued, but it tends to be broken after a while. But with divine scripture and divine law, you can always look it up again, a bit like a map. You can get lost, but if you have a map, you can find your way back to the right path again. So that is really the point of maps and recipe books and scripture containing God's laws. But it would mean the banning of usury. And I really don't have a problem with it. It's not like it's completely unprecedented, because we know the history of Jews. They were, Jews weren't allowed to practice usury on each other, but they were allowed to practice usury on Gentiles. And so European monarchs would invite Jews to come and live in their kingdom so they could borrow money off them. And then when they got tired of paying the interest, they would kick them out. So that's what they did. But banning usury would mean a more peaceful world, because a lot of wars are financed by usury. There's even a Wikipedia entry called War Finance, and you will find that it is usurious. So whether or not you believe in God, I think you'll have to admit that usury is a behavioral addiction that you will find it difficult to break, because it's so irresistible. Imagine if you had a money tree in your garden, and every time you felt a little poor, you'd go and shake it. But it would just mean, the rest, your descendants would have to pay the interest and suffer the consequences of high taxation. To pay off, either the money they borrow to finance their wars, or even worse, when they finance wars that they lose and have to pay reparations for, that would be difficult and unpleasant and result in revolutions. Yeah, so banning usury, which Jacob said was silly, but he couldn't really explain why. He just said it was silly and made sure I didn't really get a chance to respond. But I did quickly respond by saying it wasn't my idea to ban usury. Jews came up with it first, because, as I was saying earlier, Jews are not allowed to practice usury on each other. And, the intelligent, the wise Gentile capable of using his powers of deduction would know that if something is bad for the Jew, then it's probably bad for the Gentile. And this is confirmed by the Quran, that says that bans usury for Gentiles too. And I think we all know the consequence of irresponsible borrowing and lending, because we're paying for it now in taxes and desperate wars to loot other countries in the hope of maintaining our current lifestyles. bird's nest. Ratfest says banning rebuy interest usury so that the streets are paved with gold for the public. Well, so that we enjoy better government. That would be better than giving it all to the bankers. On God, why are you? Well, it's a non sequitur, isn't it? Usury is important because slavery is still the best form of economy. That's a non sequitur. Try again. Usually is time stealing. It's like time sharing, but with returns on investment. Well, I don't think you'll be writing an essay explaining what you mean. So more. It's just as well I can spot nonsense easily. So what I'm trying to say is that I do have all the arguments. I do win all the arguments, and that is why that's why so many groups are making a point of not engaging with me in case I manage to make my point and people take it. So to wind up about being very English, I think this is a reference to Western imperialism of one rule for the imperialists and the another for the conquered people. And I'm saying, even for the imperialists, they would be able to keep their empire for longer if they practice the rules of good government. And that just means showing that you care about the people and having laws that are fair enough. So what's the problem if you have the support of the Fourth Estate to change the minds and hearts of people? And this is easily done now with, social media platforms and even legacy media. What is a problem? What is a problem of granting me an interview? If mainstream media won't grant me an interview, what is the problem of YouTubers with bigger channels granting me an interview? It's because they are dishonest and dishonorable and don't want to be seen to be losing the argument to me. And this is something they should think about, because if you can't win the argument, even after so many years, then you should give it up. Because at the end of the day, truth, logic, and morality are survival strategies, and if you keep not using it, then, of course, your civilization is going to crash and burn. And I understand that there are all these people who maybe half see what I'm saying or fully see what I'm saying, but they don't want to be the first one to admit it. And that is why I'm getting such a silence from people who ought to have understood what I'm saying by now, but are, I guess, dragging their feet. And for the imperialists who want to keep their empire, obviously you will need to show moral superiority. And the only way to show moral superiority is to acknowledge your mistakes, resolve to do better, and indeed do better by ceasing doing the thing that harms you, after stopping doing the thing, yes, and after stopping the thing that harms you, you have to resolve never to do it again, and then admit publicly that you've done wrong, and then finally try to make good all the harm and damage that you caused. So it's not that hard, is it?